My name is Jonathan Schieffer. This interview, however, is with a real hacker. It is with the man who wrote the programming language Perl and who pioneered the open source movement. I don't want to give too much away other than that, but he was kind enough to let me into his house where we recorded. The other thing you might notice is that this interview is different. It's uncut. I did that for a reason. I wanted you to get a feel for who he is, what he's like, how he thinks, the pauses that he makes, those kinds of things. And also there's no cutaway to me because I only brought my one camera, the Canon T2i. So without further ado, I give you Larry Wall. I'd like to start as far back as is reasonable. And for me, that is with your education and how it's specifically in linguistics, both natural and artificial. How did you come to that?
Well, it was kind of an accident. The start of my college career was nothing like the end of it. I started out majoring in chemistry and music, and then I made the mistake of reading The Lord of the Rings and realized that there was this thing called literature, and that sort of made me sit back and say, well, maybe there's other things in the world besides chemistry and music. And so eventually, through a series of other majors, I had taken a bit of classical Greek and a bit of science, and I met my future wife-to-be, and we were both interested in linguistics, and we thought that perhaps we should be studying to be field linguists with Wycliffe Bible translators. And so we studied their program, and then I had to figure out how to get out of college with a degree. And the linguistics degree was required 2 foreign languages as well as the linguistics courses. So I only had one language, which was classical Greek, and that was a difficulty. So I did a hack. Fortunately, my college allows you to define your own majors, so I defined all my computer courses as a second foreign language, and graduated with a major in natural and artificial languages, which was just an excuse for lumping all this stuff together. And so I got out of college and went on to grad school. And little knowing that particular major would kind of predict the course of my career.
I kind of have noticed a sort of eclectic nature in creative people, and it sounds like you were pursuing creative endeavor before. I mean, music is a rather creative endeavor. I also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I also am under the impression that you played for the Los Angeles Philharmonic.
No.
No.
I played for the Seattle Youth Symphony.
Seattle Youth Symphony.
And I played in the orchestra at
yeah, take your time. There's no...
Yeah, at Grace Community Church.
Okay.
I played in the orchestra at Grace Community Church for a friend of mine. Got paid union wages there.
Nice.
I could have been a professional musician, but I was interested in more things than just that.
Do you see that the music and programming is mutually exclusive?
Almost nothing is mutually exclusive. That is one of the usual failings of thinking by people is that they think things are exclusive that aren't really. It's you know, the basic idea of being a hacker is, people often think that, well, being a hacker is an end in itself, but it's not really. It's just there's some goal you have. You know, it might be illegal, but most often not. You know, but the goal is, you know, some kind of thrill, some kind of happiness, some kind of getting something done. And a hacker is just somebody who doesn't let cultural norms get in their way. So one of those unfortunate cultural norms is that people keep saying, well, either I have to do this or I have to do that. And very often you can do both. You can design a major that's both linguistics and computers. You know, if you're reasonable or unreasonable about it, people will let you get away with it. That's kind of a funny thing, how you define reasonable and unreasonable, because, you know, George Bernard Shaw said that, you know, a reasonable man adapts himself to the world, and the unreasonable man persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. But the funny thing is that the whole logic is kind of inverted in the hacker mind, because to somebody like me, it's the other people who are being unreasonable. When Alexander the Great went in to the Gordian knot, and they said, well, you know, the person who unties this knot will, you know, conquer the world. You know, everyone else's cultural norm was that you have to untie it in the standard fashion. Alexander says to himself, that's unreasonable for me. Whack! And he cuts it with a sword. The way we define what is reasonable and unreasonable just sort of is inverted from neurotypical people, I think. Sometimes, you know, hackers have a reputation for doing illegal things, but very few hackers actually do that. Mostly they just don't let what they see as artificial barriers stand between them and what they're trying to do.
I like that. One of the artificial barriers that we have is what you encountered with. I thought it was a form of like database management when you originally wrote Perl.
Mm.
I was wondering if you could talk about that and how it came that writing a new programming language is the best solution to the problem.
Well, I don't know if it's the best solution, but it was a solution, and it seems to have worked pretty well. Yes, I was working on a secret project for a company that was doing something for the NSA, no such agency as we called it. Actually, we didn't call it that even. We said the customer, because you weren't supposed to name them. The project was on both ends of the country, and there was communication going back and forth. The data was flowing over an encrypted link, but it was a very flaky encrypted link, so the stuff would go in fits and starts. So I arranged a way to forward information when it was possible to do so, and otherwise just wait. And so this stuff was showing up kind of randomly, but it was just text files, you know, messages. They look kind of like email. The bosses wanted reports as to what was actually in these files, and they were all very ad hoc files in the formatting. But there was ways of extracting out the information if we could only, you know, recognize certain words and the way they structure the files. Well, I tried. I was using a Unix system at the time, and there are tools on there that you can make work, but they were very clunky, hard to get them to do anything. So I said to myself, well, you know, I've written toy compilers before, and some not so toy compilers. I can write a compiler for a computer language that would do what I want here. All it really needs to do is have a kind of a pattern language in it that says, here's the sort of thing I'm looking for and the bits of it that I want to pull out. And then I needed a way of taking those bits of data and formatting them into a pretty report for the boss. Now, pretty reports in those days was, on a line printer. We didn't have all this fancy web stuff. I hacked together a language that would do that, and that was Perl version 0. And it was just in this secret lab. Nobody else in the world knew about it. But it was not actually the project that I was working on. It was, not the secret project. It was just in the secret lab. So at some point, I had to kind of like sneak the language out of the secret lab, and then it went. Became Perl version 1, and I released it on Usenet in little teeny text files that people glued together and compiled and on their own system, and it was very, very hand to mouth in those days, and very low bandwidth communications. So it wasn't like people just download stuff now, and people started playing with it and liked it, and well, the rest is history. But there's a lot of history there.
It sounds like what you were doing was doing exactly what you described with the hacker mindset, which is conforming the world to what you wanted, and shortly thereafter participating in socially vague sections of society, shall we say, in that technically you weren't violating any secrecy, because the project wasn't secret, or the project was secret, but you weren't actually taking out the project.
Well, there was no established mechanism for releasing the non-secret bits of the secret project.
Right.
Technically, it was all secret. So, I could have got in trouble for that, but not terribly bad trouble. Back in those days, that people just didn't think about the notion of well, we have this software, and maybe other people want to use it too, and it would be to our benefit to just give it to them. The whole idea of open source had not occurred to people yet. So things had to be done under the table sometimes back then that can be done more efficiently nowadays.
You created something that other people had created similar things, namely languages, and other people were capitalizing on those languages, but you released yours for free. I'm assuming you didn't have...
Other people were attempting to capitalize on what they released.
Well, I'm under the impression that people were paying for C, or paying for Pascal, or BASIC came as a bundle in the software that you had to purchase.
Well, Pascal kind of came...
I mean, without getting into the minutiae of the other...
By and large, people were not succeeding in selling computer languages. They might sell a package that includes a computer language, UCSD, Pascal, but in that case, they're actually selling a bundle of things that just happens to include a language. Historically, computer companies like IBM that tried to sell a computer language by itself, that never succeeded.
So there was no market for a computer language by itself, is what you're saying?
Not much of one. You can try to do that, but people will generally prefer to use things that are freely available. Even if they have to work around some things. At that level, at that stratum of the infrastructure, it sort of had become no longer possible to really sell a language definition as a product.
But you could have sold it to a company who could then have bundled it with something else.
Yeah, but then that would be, the company would be in charge of the life or death of that language, and I wasn't particularly interested in that. I could have asked my company whether they wanted to distribute Perl, and I didn't dare. Because back in those days, they'd say, well, we'll ask the lawyers, and the lawyers would think about it for 6 months, and then they'd say, no, you can't distribute that. Well, are you going to distribute it? No, we're not going to. We'll just stick it on a shelf as our intellectual property. Well, so you couldn't make the case for open source release back then. The meme was just not there yet. So we had to release things without asking for permission. And then, in retrospect, companies realized, oh, it was good that we released these various things. Let's do more of that. And you could make a case now for letting a community develop a product alongside in a symbiotic relationship with your company.
That statement that appeared casual brought up some pretty serious social re-engineering, open source, piracy, the flexibility of,
the
commerce.
Open source is the opposite of piracy.
No, I get that,
Yeah.
but technically, I mean, I don't know if the company that you worked for had a everything you make while working for us belongs to us rule.
Technically, yes.
So technically, what you did was
your firstborn. Yeah, technically, what I did was not company policy at that point.
Granted, the world's better for it, but
yeah. The cultural norms that a hacker is willing to violate can vary from the very small ones to the very large ones. Generally speaking, you can get away with the very small ones. Nobody cares. The very large ones, you ask yourself, is this a good area for civil disobedience? And am I willing to pay the penalty if I do get caught? We see this play out. Sometimes people get caught and sometimes they don't, and sometimes good happens and sometimes good doesn't happen. But a hacker is not just willing to change culture. Many of us actually view our cultural hacks as the best hacks that we do, not the technological hacks. It's when we can get the kind of change how the culture thinks. And so the whole open source movement was a subversion of this, the company owns everything mentality. And it is still a fight that is being played out. The whole notion of software patents, copyrights, corporate intellectual IP. We've seen this recently with Oracle suing Google for whether they can use the Java APIs freely or not. There's this back and forth between when is it a reasonable thing to own intellectual property and when is it a reasonable thing to make it something that is in common. Yeah, it's the old economics thing, oversimplified, and communism versus fascism, but there's a balance to be had somewhere in the middle where you can have both of those and they kind of cooperate to produce perhaps a good way through the world, where you kind of render unto the corporation the things that are the corporations and render unto the community the things that are the communities.
So for you, being a part of the open source movement doesn't necessarily mean that you're anti-capitalism or anti our current economic structure.
I'm anti anything that, if taken to extremes, is destructive. But all of those things, medicine is poison. But we take medicines because they do something good for us. It's all a matter of degree. Capitalism, taken to extremes, is creatively destructive, but also badly destructive in ways. Same with the whole idea of share and share alike. you're going to end up with an entire society of freeloaders. There's a third way that is down the middle and trying to combine the best of both. Every idea you take, you keep saying, no, it's not either or. It's a little bit of both.
Kind of a Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah, if you want to get fancy in a non-hacker way.
When did you realize that that Perl became something huge?
Well, I knew it was going to be big when I released it.
You just how did you know that?
Because I'd already released other programs that were big. And so I already knew that if I liked something, other people would like it too. I had released a program called RN, which was a newsreader. It was kind of like a distributed bulletin board before we had the internet. I released a program called Patch, which turned out to be kind of one of the foundations of the whole open source movement. Before I released this program, there was a problem. You could send out the changes to your program, and people would not apply them because it was so difficult. They would pick and choose your, which updates to use, and everything got just a complete mess. Total problem with keeping things in sync. So I wrote this program in self-defense called Patch, which would take what we call a diff listing. It's just the differences between two files, the before and after picture, and it would send that off to a different. You'd send that off to other people, and they could automatically take that and change their file the same way you changed yours. They didn't have to do it by hand. And all of a sudden, people in projects could cooperate with each other. So people in different companies, people in different countries could send all these patches back and forth. And that kind of bootstrapped, there's a nice hacker term, kind of bootstrapped the whole open source movement. Now, I don't want to claim that I'm the only founder of the open source movement, but that was a big part of it.
The concept of patching software in its current method, you came up with?
I came up with a version of it. People had done patches before. For a particular company, you send out patches to your customers. Usually it was like going in and typing in a few numbers into random locations in your memory. It wasn't text-based the way mine was. So the patch program turned out to be a big thing, and people loved that. So I kind of knew that Perl would be big. I didn't know how big it was going to be because I did not predict the web, and it turns out that Perl was used to bootstrap the web.
You knew Perl was going to be huge. Mm. It turned out to be huge. At what point in the internet's construction did you notice it start appearing or hearing about it being huge outside of like, to use probably a little bit, I don't know, a phrase that's going to make me sound dumb, Uberleets. You know what I mean? Outside of people like yourself or...
Well, I wouldn't call them Uberleets. I'd call the community, the original community was mostly system administrators. We had only just kind of invented that term, in fact. When I wrote Perl, there was sort of no such thing as a system administrator. There were chief programmers that somehow ended up being in charge of the hardware too. So that's what I thought of myself as. And then shortly after Perl was released, I got hired at Jet Propulsion Laboratory as a system administrator. And then there was this official notion that we were maintaining the systems for the benefit of the users of the system. Now, mind you, the users at JPL are elite scientists, but they're still users in a very userly way. So Perl was used very heavily by people who were trying to support other people when other people wanted to do things that the computer was not originally built to do. Perl, because it was a text processing language, and because it had all these interfaces to other subsystems, we call it a glue language. So it's a good language for taking two things together that don't want to fit together and going smush and getting them to stick together. So that is kind of what the Perl language grew into, being a glue language and a text processing language. Then when it really took off, outside of that was with the World Wide Web. That got invented, and originally it was just HTML files with crosslinks, and people just edited those by hand. And it very soon occurred to somebody, yeah, but I've got this database at my company here, and we could make a really snazzy web page if we could just find some way of writing the HTML based on that database. So they needed a text processing language that would produce HTML. They needed a glue language that would talk to their database. There was Perl. So much of the early web was prototyped as a set of Perl scripts that you click on a link and it goes out and runs the Perl script. It interrogates your backend database, pulls the data up, writes the HTML, sends it back, and as far as your browser is concerned, it was always just an HTML file. But it's been doing all this work in the back. Now that's got a lot fancier over the years, and there's other languages that do it too. But Perl was used to help get it started initially, and so that was a matter of being in the right place at the right time with the right capabilities, and it was free. If it had not been free, it would not have been used for that.
We talked about social deviance and deviating.
Deviance or deviants?
Yes. And civil disobedience and the repercussions of certain forms of civil disobedience. Could you talk about some of the, if any, of the repercussions that you've had by participating in this movement, or taking part in, or founding, if you prefer, the open source movement, and that appears on its face value to completely contradict capitalism, but as you said, it's not. It's simply a moderator.
Well, consequences. Everything has consequences.
And they may be positive or negative. I don't mean,
yes.
I didn't mean to.
Certainly, the realization that there could be cultures and communities outside of corporations. Just as with any community that is like local, people getting together locally, a community that is spread out has many of the same dynamics. There are people going to have fun together. There are people who are going to fight. There will be disagreements in personality and temperament. There will be disagreements in goals. In short, we did not invent the idea of community. We just found a different place to install a community. So you get all the pluses and minuses of community dynamics. In particular, for something like the Perl community, it turns into kind of a cult. And I become the cult leader. So this is something that some cult leaders, they really, work it like, you are all my slaves and you have to do what I say and here's the Kool-Aid. And others, completely withdraw from that, and things just kind of tend to fall apart because there's no leadership. This is another one of those areas where you have to strike a balance. So, being the cult leader of the Perl community is something I simultaneously encourage and discourage. Hopefully, I encourage it when it should be encouraged, and I discourage it when it should be. Sometimes probably the other way around, but oh well.
So one of the consequences is having a community of people and a certain order of fame.
Yes. You get one of these strange earthly mixtures of heaven and hell that we all have to deal with. And you have to deal with the personal fame. Being famous is not always a good thing. Often it is not a very good thing. There's only a couple times that it's been very useful to me to be famous. One time was when my wife and I went to Munich and left all our paperwork behind. And we had no idea where the hotel was or even where the conference was. But I said, let's go down to the main plaza called the Marienplatz. And we walked all the way down from one end to the other, and halfway back, I saw somebody do a double take when they saw me. And I said, where is everyone? And I said, oh, they're down in this beer garden down here. So I joined them and found out what I needed to find out. So that was useful to be recognized. The other time it was fun to be famous was it finally happened to my mother. She was off up in the state of Oregon somewhere at a beauty salon, and she got the jaw drop. You're Larry Wall's mother? So I guess now she can die happy.